Hello, welcome back to the channel. My name's Shoy, and today I'm here to talk to you about a bunch of books that I bought recently, mostly non-fiction around politics and social issues and social movements, which is my favorite thing. No matter what your level of political engagement is, stick around. Hopefully there'll be something interesting that you can find from this list and might want to pick up yourself. Definitely let me know if you've read any of these or are wanting to pick up any of these, because I'd be really happy to do buddy reads. I think especially for non-fiction, it can be good to discuss things and let those ideas sort of evolve in your mind by talking to someone else. Also, I'm in a different spot right now because my washing machine is going, and I was hoping with a little bit more distance in the living room it might be quieter, but sorry if you can hear that noise in the background. I have quite a lot of books and I've kind of organized them into some categories, but I mean they don't really matter. The first set of books I'm classifying in my mind as great classic thinkers. These are figures that probably a lot of people have heard of. First of all, I have Freedom is a Constant Struggle by Angela Davis. This is the first of my book haul that I have actually read already. It's a collection of speeches and a couple interviews with Angela Davis, published 2016, but it collects a lot of things from kind of 2013 to 16 period. The subtitle, which is not on the front cover, is Ferguson, Palestine and the Foundations of a Movement. As you probably know, Angela Davis is really known for her kind of intersectional analysis around, well, the book that I do really want to read from her is Women, Race, Class. I can't remember the order. And this collection in particular is looking a lot at the Black Lives Matter and protest around police brutality and the militarization of the police, and contrasting that with the resistance in Palestine and the militarization there, and these kind of global links between the military-industrial complex. I do have quite a few thoughts on this, but I'll save that for my wrap-up video. The next book I got was Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde, another just really famous figure in especially Black feminist and intersectional kind of politics. I don't feel like I need to introduce this that much further, but I haven't read any Audre Lorde writing in full, so this is an introduction to it, and then I'll kind of explore the rest of their work at some point probably. So this one is essays, speeches, letters and interviews. Honestly, having read this one, I've realized maybe I don't love a speech compilation or interview compilation type of book. Hopefully this will have a few more essays. Next up, I've got James Baldwin, Notes on a Native Son. I read A Fire Next Time a little while ago and really enjoyed it and really enjoyed his perspective. Also interested to pick up his fiction. This is also an essay collection, and he was really influential in 1950s talking about being Black in America. This is The Will to Change, and it is around masculinity and love. I've also read a little bit of Bell Hooks. I read All About Love, and I liked some of the ideas. I have to say I didn't actually love the entire book. I didn't read all of it, but the first kind of chapter where she introduces her concept of love has been really influential and really stuck with me. Just feels really timely because of, I feel like the last decade has seen a rise in this question around healthy or positive forms of masculinity and the crisis that a lot of men are feeling that is driving them towards being radicalized. We need a pathway forward, otherwise we'll get increasing polarization and violence, and the goal is to prevent that. And also, men deserve to live good, happy, fulfilled lives. So anyway, I'll find out what this book has to say and Bell Hooks has to say about it too. Shifting gears a little bit, I've got some Noam Chomsky. I've just heard his name over and over a lot, but I haven't also read any of his books. This is another one where I don't know if this was the right book to choose of his, but I just wanted something as a starting point. My main reservation is that this is also in an interview format, so that's a little bit frustrating because now I have it. Also, I did look up a few reviews and some people were it doesn't really feel very optimistic. So I'm gonna like go in with that kind of grain of salt and maybe just use it as an opportunity to like watch some of his other like talks online while I read this. But also the subtitle for this one that is again not on the cover, which is kind of annoying. This is on capitalism, empire, and social change. Next one that I got was In Peace and Freedom, My Journey in Selma by Bernard Lafayette Jr. and Catherine Lee Johnson. So this is predominantly about Bernard Lafayette's experience during the civil rights movement. He was also like a big organizer and leader alongside Martin Luther King Jr. Specifically, according to the back, he was a co-founder of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. I'm really, really interested in this. It actually relates to another book that I bought, which was Healing Resistance. My housemate Abby already bought a copy of this, but we just love it so much that we wanted to have one edition that like stays in our house and one edition that's just on permanent loan to our friends, because we just want everyone in our lives to read it. This talks about the ideology of nonviolence that was kind of developed by Martin Luther King Jr., but also really like used as a training and organizing tool by Bernard Lafayette. So Abby and I kind of heard about him in this book and decided that we wanted to like look into those kind of source materials around Kingian nonviolence. But this one is more of like the memoir and like storytelling, which I think will still be super interesting. Now, like I mentioned, we bought a second copy of Healing Resistance, and I'll just explain it again for you guys, even though I talk about it in like every second video that I film. And this one also has like a foreword by Bernard Lafayette Jr. and David C. Jensen, who I think developed together the kind of Kingian nonviolence curriculum, if you will. And so Kazuhaga takes that curriculum and lays it out in a really clear way, calling back to those elements and principles that came up during the civil rights movement and examples, but also relating it to the modern day now and like current politics. It was actually written, I think, around 2016, so it like references Trump around his first term, also applying it to like personal life. We also picked up Kazuhaga's new book, which is called Fierce Vulnerability, which is something we're also really excited to read, because I think that idea of vulnerability is so central to having healthy, productive conflicts. And that's something Abby and I also really believe in. You can tell we've kind of like shared and bounced off these ideas a lot with each other, so I just keep mentioning Abby. But anyway, they took it with them on a little holiday, so I don't have the copy with me right now. And I forgot to like look up what it's about. We kind of just bought it because we were like, Kazuhaga, Fierce Vulnerability, sounds great, sign us up. Now I have a couple books that are like First Nations indigenous perspectives, and starting off with another book that I have read and just loved so much, which was Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Camara. I listened to this on audiobook from my library, so I really wanted to have a physical copy to annotate. I think I still like definitely prefer the audiobook, and I don't see myself rereading this one, but having it a physical copy means I can like go back to certain quotes and like skim through it, which is really nice. And again, lend it to friends. Now, I love the non-fictions just have beautiful taglines that tell you all about the book, and this one is about indigenous wisdom, scientific knowledge, and the teachings of plants. Robin Wall Camara is like a botanist, and she combines the perspective she has being an indigenous, I think a woman of the Potawatomi Nation, as well as the scientific kind of knowledge and her experience in the scientific field, and proposes a sort of way forward entwining these knowledge systems, especially as our Earth is not being taken care of and we're at a real crossroads to rethink our relationship to it. Yeah, absolutely love it. So on a similar note, I got Sand Talk by Tyson Yunkaporta, which is about how Indigenous thinking can save the world. So Tyson is an Aboriginal man from far north Queensland, and he is talking about kind of current global systems from an Indigenous point of view. I also haven't looked at the synopsis of this very much, but I've heard a lot of people in my life talking about it. One thing I remember someone mentioning was like an Indigenous perspective on time being a really like prominent part of this, or it might be his second book. This one came out in 2019, and he has another book called Right Story, Wrong Story, but also things like kinship and songlines. These are things that I have like a vague impression of, but I have never really like looked into or like tried to learn about it or sort of integrate it into my own thinking. So what I've heard from a lot of friends is that this really changed the way that they see the world. Actually, this semester at my uni, I have 2 subjects that I'm taking that are about indigenous histories and ways of like knowing. So I think it'll be the perfect time to read into this and find like a further reading list as well. So really excited about that. And then finally in this mini category, I've got Stan Grant's Talking to My Country, which is kind of like an extended essay, like a bit of a reflection on his life and a bit of his like analysis and sort of thinking. Stan Grant is also an Aboriginal man, a Wiradjuri man, from kind of central New South Wales, I want to say. I read an essay collection called Australia Day back in high school, actually. And that one was looking a lot at identity and nationhood. And I think he was reflecting on both kind of parts of his ancestry. This one is really about being Aboriginal in Australia, and a similar theme about our shared identity as Australians. I'm really, really excited to read this, and I also have been wanting to reread Australia Day for a long time. He has like a number of other books out that also look really interesting. He's also a journalist. I think he did a lot of work in like the Middle East specifically, actually Hong Kong and Beijing. So I don't know where I got the Middle East from. Maybe he did that later on. I'm popping in because I have a few ebooks that I forgot to talk about in this video. So I'm just going to include these very low-key snippets of me talking about it from my couch with both of the cats on me because it's cold and they want to snuggle. So while I'm talking about Stan Grant, I did end up getting one of his other books, With the Falling of the Dusk. And I think this was published in 2021, looking at like the rise of authoritarianism and like falling of democracy and like other international trends. There's a lot of things and buzzwords mentioned in the blurb, but I think it's just Stan Grant's kind of international political analysis. Yeah, I'll keep popping in to tell you about the other ebooks. Now I have a few that are kind of adjacent to those like indigenous perspectives. The first one is actually like a proper academic like PhD book. This was written by someone I know who was quite influential when I joined the climate movement in like developing a perspective of South Asian climate justice and land justice. This book is Politics and Resistance of Coal in Australia and India. Who knows if I will ever like read it in full because it's quite big and like, you know, like real proper small print. Another South Asian book I have is Arundhati Roy's collection of, I think, all of the non-fiction writing she has out or had out at that point in time. So this is called My Seditious Heart. Just thought I would use this fun opportunity to buy this hunk of a book rather than having to choose which one of her like collections to buy. And this one I'm not expecting to read all in one go. I think this is going to be like a long process of reading a few stories at a time around like a certain theme. I've read 2 of her fiction books, God of Small Things, which is the really famous one, which won one of the awards, like the Booker Prize or the Pulitzer Prize or something, and also the Ministry of Utmost Happiness. I read that last year, and I really enjoyed her writing and really loved like the themes she's exploring and the different perspectives that she's exploring. So I am really interested to read about it in a non-fiction form. I didn't even explain what the ideas are, but she has a real focus on marginalized perspectives in South Asia and India particularly, and very critical of like the Indian government. So for example, Kashmir and like the settler colonialism of India in Kashmir has been something she talks about a lot. Also like Dalit perspectives. Yeah. I don't know if this is going to be like a top priority for me now that I have some of like authors from those marginalized perspectives to read from directly. But again, she is just really an influential author and I'm really excited to own this. I also got 2 South Asian ebooks. One was The Rise of Hindu Authoritarianism, Secular Claims, Communal Realities, and this is by Achin Vandik. Sorry, I'm reading off my laptop. I am definitely interested in the rise of Hindutva, which is like a Hindu fascist movement that literally has power right now. And so the other ebook is on a very similar theme. It's called Hostile Homelands, The New Alliance Between India and Israel. I've also actually finished this one already. It had a whole chapter about the military-industrial complex as well. Again, those same themes really keep cropping up, and it's left me with a lot to think about. So I already can definitely recommend this book if you're interested in this particular topic. It was fucking wild. I will talk about it in my wrap up. I had so many notes. But basically, takeaway from this whole section is it's really scary seeing how India is going. Final one I'm lumping into this like global south perspectives category is The 100 Years War on Palestine by Rashid Khalidi, and this is a history of settler colonial conquest and resistance about Palestine. And according to the back, Rashid Khalidi draws on family experiences and archives as well as those of other Palestinians. I think it's been one of the really popular ones that's been going around for people who want to learn more about Palestine and its history in particular. Published in 2020. Now I have a big stack of just like political stuff. So first up, I have 2 books by Naomi Klein. I got The Shock Doctrine and Doppelganger. This is her most recent publication and has been really popular. My housemate read it recently. Honestly, I'm less interested in reading this book of hers, but it feels like because everyone's talking about it, I might as well read it. Kind of this mirroring between the internet far right and left spaces and how they can become so polarized, and in some ways they reflect similar like toxic behaviors set through the lens of her personal experience being mistaken for another famous Naomi on the internet, Naomi Wolf, who has like gone into this weird conspiracy theory like anti-trans turf pathway, I guess. And so she just has this like weird experience of this mistaken identity, but yeah, uses that as an avenue to explore how people's paths diverge, and particularly on the internet. It's the next day, but I'm back to continue talking about ebooks. I got another one of Naomi Klein's books, This Changes Everything. I forgot the subtitle. I'm pretty sure it's just about climate change and capitalism and how capitalism causes climate change. I really wanted this to be like a good intro or overview to the topic that I could like recommend people, and I thought about buying it for that reason, but it's really long, so I thought I would check it out on ebook. The other one that I'm actually most excited to read is The Shock Doctrine. This came out ages ago, 2007, and this is like her theory of how capitalism and I guess like particular big actors in capitalism, like big corporations, I guess, have used sort of disasters or big kind of shocks to society as an opportunity to like jump in and further their power and control. I think it will particularly be reflecting on the 90s and the like spread of neoliberalism. I like the sound of this because a central question that I'm very interested in is about power. If we can acknowledge that the systems we live in are really exploitative and not sustainable for society and cause a lot of injustice and harm and violence. Once we've acknowledged that, the real question is how can we change it? And I think that comes to the question of power. And so trying to understand why certain people and companies and institutions have so much power, how did they get it? How do they maintain it? I think that's one side of the coin. And then of course we have to look at the other side of the coin, which is how can we create alternative forms of power? How can we disrupt that power and create our own? I've got a few books on that theme as well that I will come to later. But also in that theme about like capitalism, I guess, I also got Techno-Feudalism by, I also don't have a copy of this because Abby took it for holiday reading, so let me just search it up. Yanis Varoufakis, and he was Greece's, I think, like treasurer or one of those like financial positions for a while, and then became prime minister, I'm pretty sure. And he became this quite prominent figure talking about capitalism and neoliberalism because Greece was facing a lot of shit deals basically from the International Monetary Fund. I learnt a little bit about this in high school history. So he's come out with this book more recently about how the current age we're living in is kind of like this next evolution of capitalism that is kind of reverting back almost to a feudal system of like very few key actors having total control. Again, I haven't read this book, so I don't know entirely what the argument or the concepts are, but my understanding from other things I've read on this topic is that these mega companies basically just own our markets, I guess, but like more than that, they just have like dominated the systems that we live in a weird way. And like think of Amazon and Uber. Anyway, I feel like it's a scary book, but also one that feels super, super pressing and relevant. I think it's going to be one of my next reads. Really interested in this. I actually watched a video on a similar topic about like the end of Western capitalism, which I'll link in the description because I thought it was really interesting. I want to complement it with how we can build people power, which relates to the next two books that I got. First of all, we have Why Civil Resistance Works by Erica Chenoweth and Maria J. Stefan. Subtitle is The Strategic Logic of Nonviolent Conflict. And this is also quite an academic one that I don't know if I will read all of it, but I was just like really interested in having this source material because this is where the idea of the like 3.5% of the population looks at a few different case studies. I think there's a lot of examples from like the Arab Spring, but also I've forgotten the like historical word, but like overthrow of a lot of the authoritarian states, like post-Soviet states in like Eastern Europe. And it looks at how nonviolent resistance movements of people just refusing to cooperate with the state led to overthrow of these dictatorships. And so I think as part of that analysis, they come to this conclusion that like in all of the successful cases or something like that, around 3.5% of the population, that has to be the critical mass who choose to not cooperate with the state, and that creates enough of a dilemma that it can overthrow an authoritarian regime. That's my like strong paraphrasing, but I think that whether or not that's actually what the data and the research shows, that I think is the takeaway that a lot of people have used to create their strategies in particularly the climate movement. Extinction Rebellion basically like set up on the basis of this research. I just like kind of wanted to read this or read parts of it as a bit of like myth busting almost, and like yeah, just going directly to what they actually said so I can understand it better. Don't know if it's going to really be useful for me because it might be a bit too academic and whatever. So anyway, we'll see how that goes. Another book that is like going into those details about how movements can win and create change is Hegemony How To, A Roadmap for Radicals by Jonathan Matthew Smucker. I've read this book, I borrowed it from a friend like several years ago. He reflects a lot on the Occupy movement. He was kind of involved with like Occupy Wall Street. This just has a lot of lessons for left-wing movements and spaces, critiquing some of the tendencies of left-wing spaces and people. And then part of the book that is like more instructive about how we actually try to shift the dominant systems. And I think the main idea that I really liked from this book was that we can't create like an alternative lefty club. I think he calls it an activist playhouse, and how like basically removing ourselves from mainstream society or creating this moral high ground is really counterintuitive, and it doesn't help us actually build power or change the dominant systems. So yeah, I am really excited to annotate this and also lend this out and go back to the quotes that I really liked from it. We have the final set of ebooks to talk about. I got a few exciting ones about organizing and creating change, raising expectations and raising hell, My Decade Fighting for the Labor Movement, which is by Jane McAlevey, who was a really influential trade unionist in the US. The role of unions and how they operate has changed a lot over the decades, and this is the same in Australia, so I don't know how much I'm projecting onto the US, but basically like unions have become very much like service providers rather than kind of agitational spaces for like winning workers' rights, if that makes sense. Like there's not as much conflict with the bosses, there's a lot more negotiating with the bosses, but if you're not using your power or threatening to use your power, you can't negotiate. And in general, I think it's just way less common to join your union, and people don't have a good perception of them. They're kind of like, what is it going to do for me? And this book is a lot of her reflections on her approach and how that differs to the mainstream union movement. I feel like this is one of those books that might be quite accessible. Like, I think she's going to be doing a bunch of storytelling and looking at case studies, so I'm super interested to read it. Next, I had If We Burn, The Mass Protest Decade and the Missing Revolution by Vincent Bevins. He's the author of The Jakarta Method, which I'm going to talk about very soon in the video. But this is a really recent release. Well, it says 2023, but I think it will be really useful to like look at that analysis of movements like Black Lives Matter, things that I talked about in Why Civil Disobedience Works, which is really interesting because I think, you know, a decade or 2 decades on, this analysis is like, did it really work? So this will be really interesting to read like with that book. Another book that's kind of analyzing the last few decades of leftist politics and movements is The Populist Moment, The Left After the Great Recession, which is by Arthur Borriello and Anton Jaeger. In the blurb, it's talking about like a rise in anti-establishment, left-wing, like politics in the US and Western Europe and the Mediterranean. I think it'll be really interesting to like not focus just on the rise of authoritarian or fascist politics, but like there has been a sort of waves of left-wing politics, and yeah, I think populism is a big feature of that, and that's the argument of this book. I feel like this will be good like learning opportunity and like give me things to like look into further. A book I'm really excited for was The Revolution Will Not Be Funded Beyond the Non-Profit Industrial Complex, and this is like kind of like a manifesto. Like, it's not a traditional book and a traditionally published book, so it's like by the Insight Women of Color Against Violence and Critical Resistance, and I think it was really influential in spreading this idea of NGO industrial complex, and like basically how NGOs sort of take away from real opposition to capitalism and right-wing shit. Having worked in the NGO space for the last 5 years, I have a lot of criticisms of it, and it can be kind of insidious how these NGOs are propped up. Like, a lot of it is just backed by billionaires. So this is a really cool book, and I feel kind of funny buying it as I like quit my job at an NGO. My arm really hurts, so I'm going to speed through the rest. How Fascism Works, The Politics of Us and Them by Jason Stanley. I also didn't really know about this book, and then when I was checking out my ebooks, they're just like quite cheap, and this one was recommended, and me and my housemates are really interested in understanding fascism, as you can tell by the theme of all of these books. Less is More, How Degrowth Will Save the World by Jason Hickel. I'm really interested in the idea of degrowth. I feel like it's kind of in the same vein maybe as donut economics, which I also considered buying. I don't know a lot about economics, so just anything in that topic I think would be great to read about. Then I got Health Communism, A Surplus Manifesto by Adi Virkant and Beatrice Adler-Bolton, and I was recommended this by Sunny from A Sunny's Book Nook. Well, I wasn't recommended. She talked about it in a video, and I thought it was really interesting, so it was exciting to see it on this book website. I'll link all of the places I got books from below, because I tried not to go with like the mainstream publishers. I feel like it's kind of self-explanatory from the title, but it was strongly recommended, and my dad's a doctor, so I kind of want to understand like politics and stuff from that health perspective, so I can discuss it with him as well. But also, health is just really important to society. Now, I think this is the final ebook I bought, which was The Transgender Issue, Trans Justice is Justice for All by Sean Fay. And this was just like on my reading list. You know, I care about trans rights. I think it's interesting to always look at these issues from a more systemic way and how it affects everyone, rather than like single issues or identity politics. So I'm very interested in this. Now, I did forget to talk about one physical book, which I'm going to get. This is Abundance by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson. I think Ezra Klein's quite influential, and specifically this book has been seen with a lot of Australian Labor politicians, and has been really influential to like Biden and a lot of Democrats. So it's like a current fucking wave going around about the ideas in this book. The basic premise is like increasing efficiency so that we can do the kind of big builds and big projects needed to transition our world and be a better place. So like, you know, it's kind of about stuff like the renewable transition, but I think also just like social welfare projects and all of that. But I think like some of the conclusions he comes to is things like we have really inefficient systems because of a lot of like regulations, and maybe we need to cut back on regulations. And it's kind of a means justifying the ends argument that like we need to pick and choose like what we prioritize, and right now we need to prioritize like dramatically shifting our society and our infrastructure. So I think like there is some truth to that, and these are important questions, and we can't just like stay on morality high horses. We need to be kind of pragmatic, but I also have some reservations around that kind of pragmatic frame of mind. So we got this book because we're like, we need to know what our current leaders are thinking about, but also we want to critique it. So this will be really interesting to read. I think it'll be really challenging as well. That's all the cutaways I have. Back to the video. The final two non-fiction books I have is The Great Divide by Alan Kohler, and this is about Australia's housing mess and how to fix it. It's basically about the housing crisis. This was a request from my housemate, but I'm also really interested to read about it. Finally, I have The Jakarta Method by Vincent Bevins, which is Washington's anti-communist crusade and the mass murder program that shaped our world. It's basically about the US's kind of programs through like the CIA and fucking military, blah, blah, blah. Specifically looking at the like massacres of communists and left-wing people in the global south, and the way that they violently stamped out any alternative to capitalism, and also just like any different systems of these nations that were becoming independent so that they could maintain their global hegemony. Anyway, I think this is going to be a really angering read, but also just really interesting. Like, what an incredibly huge part of history that is so untold. I'm fascinated by it. But you know, I think it'll also be quite dark. Okay, to wrap up the video, I'm gonna share a few fiction books that I've bought just very quickly because I have to leave the house soon. You might have seen in my reading vlog, which you should watch if you haven't already, that I went on a camping trip, went and visited a little regional op shop, and was really surprised to find Sally Rooney's Intermezzo. I love normal people, didn't love conversations with friends. I don't think I'm like someone who really wants to go into authors' complete works. So this wasn't something I was reaching for, but because it was there for only like $4, I thought I might as well have a go. I don't think I will read it anytime soon, but I just have it now, and I do really love the copy, and like that color is just gorgeous. But another recent release that I was so excited to find and is going to be my priority in the next few months was Fundamentally by Nusayba Yunus. I'm so fascinated by this book and I cannot wait to read it. The synopsis is that the main character is kind of an academic who's written about de-radicalizing ISIS brides, or like women who've been radicalized by ISIS, and she gets tasked by like the UN, I think, to actually go and work with some of these women, and it's about her like coming to terms with reality and how different the reality is to the like academic writing she has done. I think it's supposed to be a really funny commentary on world of international aid, so really excited about that, but also this relationship between these two women. I feel like I've heard hints that there is like a sapphic undertone or potentially explicit tone, so that has me quite intrigued. Anyway, yeah, I'm really, really excited for this, and I literally had not seen any copies in Australia. I think it was only recently published in Australia. And then I also showed you in my vlog that I got The Sea of Poppies by Amitav Ghosh from a secondhand bookshop again. I love. I have one other of his books on my shelf already, and I found out actually that he is my grandfather's favorite author, or one of his favorite authors. And so my grandpa also gave me his edition of In an Antique Land. So yeah, I've got a growing collection even though I haven't read any of his books. This one is a historical book, something about a motley crew of sailors, coolies and convicts. It's actually a trilogy, and I think it spans across like different parts of the world. So yeah, I think it's going to be really cool. That is all. which feels funny to say because that was a hell of a lot of books. But it's been really fun to talk about these, and I really hope that some of them have piqued your interest, and particularly if you want to pick up any of these books, let me know in the comments. It doesn't have to be anytime soon. I have a long list of books to read. I guess just to let you know, my priorities are sand talk, techno-feudalism, probably Sister Outsider. I don't know if I'll get to James Baldwin this year. And of course, fundamentally. So if you're interested in any of those, then let me know soon. But if you're just interested in any of the other books, then also tell me about it. Thanks for spending this time with me. I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your week and are taking care of yourselves and each other. I will see you in my next video. Bye!